We are ready. We are ready. Good to go.
Thank you very much. Welcome to all members of the audience and the panelists to this ICS Wednesday seminar, a special event which is devoted to a new monograph produced with the collaboration with the Institute of Chinese Studies in Delhi. And the topic is China-Zambia Economic Relations, Perspectives from the Agricultural Sector. I would like to begin by saying my name is Rajiv Bhatia. I'm a distinguished fellow in Gateway House, another prestigious think tank in India. I bring to you all the greetings of Gateway House. I've also spent many years in Africa as India's High Commissioner to Kenya, South Africa, and Lesotho. I did not serve in Zambia, but I had the opportunity to visit Zambia and also to meet and interact with its great leader, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. I wish to, first of all, express my deep appreciation for the fine work that ICS has been doing over a long period, especially in the recent years, at a time when we in India and our friends abroad need to understand, comprehend, appreciate what China is all about, not only China's society, politics, foreign policy, but also China's role in the world. This is a crucial input in the shaping and conduct of India's external relations and India's bilateral relations with China and Africa. And therefore, we are grateful to ICS for taking this laudable initiative. I also want to add that I'm a regular at this institute, have gained a lot of insights on China, and this is a new experience for me today to chair and moderate this discussion. I thank Director Ambassador Ashok Kantha for giving me this opportunity. Now, my job is really at this stage is to put across very quickly the broader context of this discussion today. Africa Day has just been celebrated. Africa is a continent with future. It does not matter whether you are an optimist or a pessimist or a realist. I think all the three categories agree that Africa would have a great role to play in world affairs in the 21st century. And therefore, I think we need to fully understand as to what a dozen or more international actors have been doing in Africa. Because unless and until we understand that, for none of us, not for Africa, not for the international actors, not for others, it would be possible to accurately shape and conduct our relations with Africa. So in that context, the focus today is going to be on China. On China, we have broadly, multiple views, but broadly three schools. Usually first from the Chinese media and Chinese officialdom, we hear nothing but, quite understandably, all the positive things about China's role in Africa. The second school, which is often reflected in the writings of scholars in the West, at times also in India, is that there is nothing that China does right in Africa. And the third school is largely from Africa, which is also somewhat divided among critics and admirers. But overall, my impression is that the African view on China's role is far more positive than the Western and other critics of China. So in that broad intellectual context, I think the scholars of today have chosen Zambia. It's a small country in southern Africa. Population is merely 17 million. The nominal per capita income is only $1,307. So it's a developing country. It is also a landlocked country. It's a country with a very limited economic base, and agriculture plays a very significant role in the overall economic situation. As I mentioned earlier, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda belonged to that tiny band of the tall leaders of Africa who put Zambia on the map of the world. And he was one of the first leaders to hand over power peacefully to the next generation of leadership. So that was the greatness of his country and this leader. So in this slide, now very quickly, a word about the monograph. This is a new study. It's a study about China, Zambia, the whole spectrum of economic relations, but the focus will be on the agricultural sector. And the purpose, I would like to stress, of this monograph is to draw some practical and appropriate lessons for the benefit of India. So as far as I can see, this study serves, first of all, the interests of academics who always have to be curious to get to the bottom of the truth. And it certainly will be very, very useful to Indian policymakers and Indian public opinion. Now, finally, the striking features of this study. There are three of them. I would like to very quickly highlight them. Firstly, it's a broad study of the economic relationship. But as I mentioned earlier, there would be an insightful discussion on agriculture and the related fields. Secondly, it has been done by a group of scholars who belong to and are based in Zambia, India, and China. I think this is the strength of this group because they bring in different backgrounds, different skills, and different viewpoints. And the third feature to my mind is that through not merely academic and desk research, but also ground level interviews, the panelists have come up, the authors have come up with a study that draws some specific conclusions for the Indian government, the Indian business and industry, and Indian academics. So I feel that this is something that deserves very close attention. So at this time, my final point is to highlight the central role played by Dr. Veda Vaidyanathan. She is a very astute and bright researcher. She knows Africa very well. She has done similar studies elsewhere relating to Africa. And she undoubtedly is the scholar of the Gen Next from India when it comes to African affairs. So I welcome her, and I also welcome every panelist who comes with a sterling background. And I request now, first of all, Dr. Veda Vaidyanathan to take over from here and say her piece. Over to you, Dr. Veda Vaidyanathan.
Thank you, sir. Let me just quickly share my screen before I begin my presentation. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, sir, and for those very generous compliments. I hope you can see the screen.
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So like the ambassador mentioned, this study is part of the ICS's China and the World research vertical, which aims to understand China's place in the world and understand its global footprint. In this sense, it became very important to closely examine what China was doing in Africa. So in 2018, the ICS started studying China's infrastructure development in Tanzania and Kenya. That was the first project we did under the vertical. And now the second study, we chose to look at Zambia and the agricultural sector. So for the uninitiated, a quick overview of some of the basics. China is today Africa's largest trading partner and the single biggest creditor. It's also the single largest financier of African infrastructure, constructing 1 in 3 and financing 1 in 5 projects in the continent. it becomes important to look at what China is doing in Africa from an Indian perspective, because several countries in Africa have been historical partners for India and have now evolved into very important development partners. More importantly, in several countries in the continent, there are huge Indian companies like the Tatas and the Airtels, but there are also several small and medium scale enterprises and also small entrepreneurs who, several of them are first generation, but some of them also belong to the diaspora. And it's important for us to sort of get a grassroots idea of what's actually happening in these regions and sort of comprehend the evolving dynamics. Zambia becomes very interesting to study from this perspective because the China-Zambia relationship is also historic. It's the Tazara Railway that China built is often considered the watershed moment in China-Africa relations. It's also a country that's politically stable. There's been no forex crisis. It's been blessed with a suitable climate. It also has a thriving agricultural sector. And more importantly, the government of Zambia, while having in place several incentives for foreign investors, are taking a special interest in attracting Chinese FDI. For instance, several officials from different ministries in Zambia go to these road shows in China, different job fairs and expos, to try and attract Chinese investments. The ZDA has also hired a Chinese citizen to sort of help them, make this process a little easier. So when we put this project together, we of course did an extensive literature review and desktop research, but then we also spent time in the field interviewing farmers and entrepreneurs and agronomists and officials and entrepreneurs to get multiple perspectives. So when we put together a team to write this monograph, we, at the center of it, we identified several Zambian scholars who were working on China. And we also got some very young, bright Indian students. For instance, Mukund Agarwal, who is actually on call right now, was at the time of writing a student at IIM Kashipur. We also had Bihu Chamadia, who is a master's student at Central European University, help out with the study. The aim, like Ambassador Bhatia mentioned, is largely to inform policymakers and industry of what's actually happening in these regions, in these separate sectors. But we also hope to sort of contribute to a larger China-Africa discourse, which emanates broadly from the West. But we hope that we can sort of provide an alternate perspective to the ongoing conversation. So just to give you a sort of a snapshot, as this graph shows, China investments in Zambia has sort of really exponentially increased after 2015. And if you look at the graph below, the sectors that are getting most of the investments is manufacturing, mining, and construction. So before my colleagues start to go in depth into agriculture, what I'll do is quickly give you an overview of the larger China-Zambia economic relations. So mining is at the core of this relationship. Zambia is Africa's second largest producer of copper. It houses 6% of the world's copper reserves, contributes significantly to the Zambian government revenues. And China is the world's biggest importer of copper, accounting for almost half of the global copper ore imports. While the sector in Zambia has traditionally been dominated by Western companies, Chinese actors have been increasing their footprint across the value chain. According to one of the officials in the mining industry, he said that within the next 3 to 5 years, at least 5 of the original copper belt mines will be Chinese owned. So we met with people, the managers of China copper mines in Chingola. But what was really interesting was that there were these small and medium scale enterprises. There were these entrepreneurs who had come from China. One of the entrepreneurs we had interviewed, he had absolutely no experience in the mining sector. He had actually come to trade textiles in South Africa, and he heard that the copper industry had incredible potential and moved to Chingola and was processing the copper collected from dump sites and into these metal sheets that you see in the picture here, and then exporting that to China. Similarly, there were some other smaller entrepreneurs we spoke to who actually came from mining companies in China and had come with their entire families, wives, daughters, sons-in-law, and very reluctant 16-year-old kids who were now living in Chingola and trading copper. Similarly, infrastructure development is also a huge part of the relationship. From roads, bridges, airports, stadiums, most of the landscapes that we traveled in, we could see Chinese banners and Chinese characters. When we spoke to managers at infrastructure firms, they told us that the biggest competition in the Zambian infrastructure market were other Chinese firms. And then when we looked at the larger projects like the airport development plan, more than one Chinese company was involved. That is to say that the major contractor subcontracted most of the smaller bids to other Chinese subcontractors. While Chinese infrastructure has been vital to Zambia, like for instance, the Levi Manwasa Hospital has been critical in Zambia's fight against COVID-19, there's also been a lot of criticism around the fact that some of these projects could be white elephant projects in the sense that they haven't created the kind of backward and forward linkages or generated the kind of employment as expected. Similarly, manufacturing is a sector that's really received a lot of investments as well. So then why would we study agriculture, right? So just some basics. In Zambia, the agricultural sector comprises of crops, livestock, fisheries, and it also has small scale, medium and large scale farmers, although most of the farmers are subsistence small scale farmers. It contributes 20% to GDP and employs over 70% of the population. And while 58% of the land is suitable for agriculture production, only 14% is currently under cultivation. The country is divided into 3 areas, depending on varying degrees of rainfall it receives. And all of these areas have very high soil quality, which means that the number and type of crops that can be grown are higher. And more importantly, the government of Zambia has in place several incentives for foreign investors, which is of course necessary for economic growth and poverty reduction in the country. These foreign investors can lease land, usually for a period of 99 years. So beyond large-scale farming, agriculture also has immense business potential in supplying farm inputs, equipment, irrigation systems, agro-processing, commodity training, and so on. So right now, Indian and Chinese companies are present across the agro-business value chain. As a matter of fact, one of the first projects that I ever worked in when I was a first-year PhD student was with my PhD supervisor, Professor Prajita Biswas. And that was a study that looked at Indian farmers active in the Zambian agricultural sector. And after that, my PhD also looked at Ethiopian farmers, Indian farmers in Ethiopia. So as you can see, the agro-business industry is something that the Indian entrepreneurial, the industry is very interested in. And that is one of the reasons we chose to study the agricultural sector. So now going ahead, I will cede the floor to my colleagues who will present their papers. And then I will circle back to discuss some conclusions and insights at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Veda. As suggested by you, we are now going to request Mr. Sridhar Chilu to take the floor. He is currently Senior Research Fellow at the Zambia Institute for Policy Analysis and Research, and we invite him to present his remarks.
Thank you, Excellency Ambassador Bhatia, for the kind introduction, and thank you to ICS for inviting me, and Veda as well. Thank you for those presentations. I think the opening remarks by Excellency Ambassador Bhatia were an excellent way of starting us off in terms of the background to Zambia, and I don't have to do much of that, as well as what Veda has covered. In my quick presentation, I will look at some of the aspects to do with bilateral trade relations between China and Zambia. The reference period that I've looked at is 2000 to 2018, just to get a perspective of how the relationship has evolved over time. So the study adds to the general body of literature. As I have said, it takes a bilateral trade relations lens, and we try to get some insights on what is particularly important for a small open economy such as Zambia to consider. And we try to drill down on agricultural trade, relationship between China and Zambia on agricultural trade. We use fairly simple but somewhat intuitive descriptive statistical analysis to generate some of these insights. I would like to go, both of the previous speakers have done an excellent job of already explaining that in social, in political, in economic terms, even in demographic terms, Zambia and China are very different. The current GDP for Zambia with China, Zambia's GDP between 2015 and 2018 on average was about $24 billion per year, whereas China's GDP averaged about 12 trillion. And just to put that into perspective, that's 500 times larger than the Zambian economy. So China definitely is a huge economy, and Zambia is a very small economy in comparison. In terms of manufacturing value added, at least by around 2018, 2019, Zambia GDP in terms of manufacturing, 9% of its GDP comprises of manufacturing value add, meaning that the economy has relatively much higher productive capacities underpinned by science and technology and innovations. When we look at exports as well, in 2019, Zambia's exports were 7.5 billion compared to China's exports, which were 2.5 trillion. So again, a striking difference. China being 333 times larger than Zambia. And yet, somehow, China manages to find relation.
Mr. Chilo, you're not audible.
There's a little bit of connectivity problem.
The smallest of economies around
should
the
be all
world.
right.
Can you
The
switch off
Chinese
your video
economy
and just
doesn't
keep the
seem to
audio on?
take, if we look at the bilateral trade between
Yeah.
China and
Mr.
Zambia,
Chelu, what is being suggested
Zambia's
is,
exports
Yeah.
at a relative exports by.
okay, carry on.
I have switched off the video. I hope that will improve the connectivity a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
So the bilateral trade has grown more in terms of China's exports to Zambia, which have grown by 1.8% in 2000. This rate has increased to 11% by 2018, whereas exports from Zambia to China have not grown as much. But it's important to notice that the growth in Zambian exports was possibly because Zambia has had a trade surplus, so it was already exporting at a pretty high level to China. And over the whole period, 2000 to 2018, Zambia has actually had a trade surplus over China. Implying that it has managed to export more to China than just exports to Zambia suggests that in terms of exports. Another important thing to consider is what is the quality of these bilateral exports that are going from across the two countries. We did some analysis by product, and what we noticed is that Chinese exports to Zambia are very diversified, and they are focused on high-value, sophisticated products, whereas exports from Zambia to China are very concentrated, not diversified at all. They're almost 100% concentrated in one commodity, which is copper. So again, this demonstrates that China has great capabilities in terms of the domestic productive capacities. And in Veda's presentation, I think we saw where some of the investment interests of China are in Zambia, and agri was one of them. Of course, compared to the other sectors, the investments in agri were relatively lower. And an interesting thing related to agri, and if we just take one very specific example of how China is able to take advantage and focus on even the smallest of markets around the world. Zambia has traditionally had a deficit on fish consumption. When you compare supply and demand, has had a deficit. And I think China noticed this because if you look at fish exports from China, to Zambia, they grew 2000 to 2004 per year on average in the period 2015 to 2018. And if you go behind the numbers to the qualitative story here, it is that China actually did some research and established that the most popular type of fish in Zambia is tilapia. And they were able to harvest genetic material in Zambia and go and start production lines in China of tilapia, which they have then been able to export to Zambia to support meeting the deficit. And I think these are some of the important lessons for small economies like Zambia, is how do they strategically replicate the China model in terms of building productive capacities? How do economies attract Chinese foreign direct investment that will help them to build their domestic productive capacities, aspects to do with improving the ease of doing business in agriculture, improving commercialization, modernization, and so on and so forth. And when we think about the fact that China does not only focus on FDI as a form of development finance, even debt is an option, then it's important for Zambia to think about how to harness the debt, because as has been said in the previous presentation, debt from China makes up about 27 to 35% of Zambia's total public and source of finance. To see where to dedicate it and build productive capacities that will improve both Zambia around the world. With those few remarks, I would like to thank everybody once again for giving me this opportunity to make the presentation. And I would like to take us through to the next presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear friend, for a succinct presentation. I know that there was some connectivity problem, but it was good that you had your PPT and it can be made available to everybody. Now, at this stage, let me invite Mr. Musa Dabwe Chulu, who is working in the Ministry of Agriculture in the government of Zambia as a policy analyst, and is also a part-time instructor in public policy at the University of Lusaka. So over to you, Mr. Chulu.
Good afternoon and thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here and to be part of the ICS seminar series. So my presentation today will focus on enhancing Zambia's human capacity, the dynamics of Zambia-China agriculture skills and knowledge transfer. So my colleagues are not with me today, but I think this is a research we did with two other colleagues, Dr. Nalwimba and Dr. Mdimu, who are not here with us today. So to get started, first of all, I would like to ride on what Veda had presented with regard to the agriculture sector. I think it gives us very good background for us to start our discussion on this topic of knowledge and skills transfer. As Veda alluded to, the agriculture sector in Zambia is one of the major economic sectors that supports over 50% of the population. And in terms of contribution to the economy, the agriculture sector in Zambia over the past 5 to 6 years has averaged a contribution of around 9% to the gross domestic product. Now, despite its importance to the economy, the agriculture sector has not been able to live up to the expectations of most Zambians because of the several challenges that are inherent in the sector. And one key challenge that has been identified by the government has been the low production and productivity. This is in reference to the average yields that the Zambian farmers get when we compare them to the average yields in Africa and the world averages. So in order to address this low production and productivity, one mechanism that has been identified has been skills development. And in so doing, in the agricultural extension strategy by the government, it plans to train at least 3,500 staff in agricultural production techniques. At this stage, allow me to give a bit of context to the study that we undertook with my colleagues. Basically, I'm going to look at why we did this study, what we looked at, and how we did this study. The main motivation for this study was that if you look at the cooperation between Zambia and China, the cooperation between Zambia and China goes back since pre-independence and immediate post-independence. And the Chinese government through FOCAC has provided an opportunity for the Zambian government to have some of its staff trained in agricultural skills and knowledge. Now, having said that agriculture supports over 50% of the livelihoods, for us, it seems that China is a country we can learn from with regard to moving people out of poverty using agrarian reform. And in addition, we've noted an increase in Chinese investment in the agriculture sector. And this investment in the agriculture sector in Zambia by the Chinese is from the state government, the national government, provincial governments, as well as individual farmers. And we realize that some of the skills that our staff gain in China can be applied to these investments. And something interesting is that my colleagues and I are also beneficiaries of Chinese scholarships at master's and PhD level. So this is also what provided some extra motivation for us to look into the dynamics of knowledge and skills transfer between Zambia and China. So in conducting our study, we conducted interviews with participants in the Chinese held trainings. We also interviewed key informants from the Chinese economic consulate in Zambia to give us some in-depth knowledge on the types of trainings that are conducted in China. So basically, in the study, we looked at how the technology transfer occurs, what are the challenges with regard to technology, skills transfer, and what would be the policy implications for the Zambian government and the Chinese government with regard to the outcomes of the trainings conducted in China. So just a summary of the key findings. We noted that since the year 2000, over 900 staff in the Ministry of Agriculture have undergone training in China. And this gives us an average of about 80 staff every year. And interestingly, we have at least 40% female participation in the trainings that are undertaken in China. With regard to the selection of the participants, both the Ministry of Agriculture and the Chinese consulate are actively involved in selection of the participants in these trainings. The major mode of delivery for the trainings were seminars and workshops that were held in China for a duration of 2 to 3 weeks. The longest duration training was about 45 days, and those were quite few. Now, we noted some challenges in the training, some outcomes and challenges with the training that were held in China. We noted that some of the courses that were offered for training by the Chinese government were not fully linked to the training needs development plan of the Ministry of Agriculture. This was one of the biggest challenges we noted. But we are also happy to learn that most of the participants in the training thought that the trainings were very applicable to the Zambian situation, although the differences in the technologies between Zambia and China might make them a bit difficult to implement in Zambia. And thus there might be need for adaptation of the trainings to the Zambian situation. And we noted that most of the trainings that are done in China and are implemented in Zambia are not fully supported in country by either the government or the Chinese government. Now, what this means is that most of the training that will occur, or most of the in-country capacity building that will occur, will be by the initiative of the officer that has been trained in these trainings. Over and above, it's worth noting that most of the officers actually think that they are able to transfer some of these skills to the small-scale farmers in the country. Our conclusion recommendations, we note that the staff that were selected are staff that interact with the small-scale farmers, and the benefits of these trainings are likely to be passed on to the small-scale farmers. However, we note that the trainings should be adapted to the Zambian situation. We also recommend that mechanization centers be established in Zambia. This way we shall be able to bridge the gap between the technology used in China during the trainings and the technology that is available locally here in Zambia. And one of the key recommendations we make is that we need to have that linkage between the training courses that are designed in China and the staff skills needs according to the Ministry of Agriculture training plan. Overall, with regard to what lessons India can learn from this approach, we've noted that South-to-South cooperation still remains very key in skills transfer. We note that India also has some form of trainings with the Ministry of Agriculture, which might be similar, which might take the form of workshops. So our recommendation for such trainings and future build-up of such skills transfer is that some in-country trainings be undertaken, apart from the workshops where the Zambians travel out to learn. Follow-up trainings in-country should also be conducted to enhance the skills of the local Zambians and also adapt the trainings to the Zambian needs. And with those few remarks, I'll end here, and I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Listening.
Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. Let us now turn to the next panelist, and he is Muyobozi Sikalabkuya. He's a research fellow and lecturer of history in the School of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Zambia. He has incredible credentials, and I'm sure there would be a lot of interest in his unique topic, which is right now on the screen, and I would request him to elaborate on this topic. Over to you, Mr. Sikalubea.
Thank you so much. I hope you're able to get me clearly. Am I audible enough?
Yes, yes. Maybe you can speak just a bit loudly, that's all.
All right, thank you so much. I'll quickly, rush to my presentation today, which is a chapter in our monograph, and it's entitled Artificial Intelligence in Zambian Agriculture, where we're looking at a case study of a Chinese firm based in Guangzhou, GFA Technology Company, also known as Shang. Okay, so basically, this company, Shang company, is currently, headquartered in Guangzhou, but it has subsidiaries across China, Korea, Zambia, and the whole purpose of this company is working to provide advisory services for sowing, land preparation, application of fertilizer, and pest control using the drones. So it uses artificial intelligence such as the drones in order to combat some of the pests that have ravaged crop fields in Zambia. So in general, this partnership between China and Zambia, they partnered in order to fight against the fore armyworm, which had affected most of the crop fields in Zambia. So this small oriented pest has been causing devastations over the main grain producing regions in Zambia. In China, the Ministry of Agriculture combated this fore armyworm using drones. As a result, when this pest had been identified in Zambia, the Zambian government decided to merge with this company, Shang company, and adopted artificial intelligence in the agriculture sector in order to fight against this fore armyworm. As a result, we found that this company was able to spray over 270 hectares of cropland in Zambia, and they managed to eliminate this pest. So based on the concrete application of artificial intelligence, we find that a science-driven integrated pest management method has been established and incorporated to fight against this fore armyworm. So consequently, the application of artificial intelligence, such as drones, attracted a number of youths in the industry, in the agriculture industry, because it's kind of fascinating and very intriguing to a number of youths who are who have huge potential in the agriculture sector. So the use of drones in the agriculture sector, the adopted technology devices basically just avails information on meteorological conditions, the breeding precipitations, and soil grades, pest infiltration, using these drones and remote sensing. So to that effect, in Zambia, we find that even in China, the future of farming fundamentally hinges on the adoption of artificial intelligence in the sector, in the agriculture sector. So in conclusion, or in summary, we just want to see what has been done. So the adoption and application of artificial intelligence in the Zambian agriculture sector, it has enabled most of the farmers in the local area to mitigate factors deterring agribusiness growth. However, despite all these efforts to foster the application of artificial intelligence in the agriculture, there is still a deficiency of expertise in using high-tech machinery among small-scale farmers in Zambia. So we found that in Zambia, innovation research in the agriculture sector precisely is still at infant stage. Therefore, the industry is still underserved. Hence, this could be a great opportunity for India to venture into this sector and collaborate with the Zambian government through the Ministry of Agriculture, via the use of artificial intelligence, in order to ensure that all the farmers are able to use these drones, and they're able to use other artificial intelligence devices that India can provide in the agriculture sector. So having said that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you will receive quite a few questions, and I want to kindly reserve my question in advance with you. This high-tech use, drones use, the question would be whether these are Chinese drones, and whether technicians are Chinese or Zambians, but just keep it with you. We'll come back to this later. Thank you for your very good presentation. And dear friends, now let us turn to the next panelist. In fact, she is the last one on the panel, Ms. Tong Wu, who is an independent China-Africa consultant based in East Africa. She has extensive experience in management, consulting, marketing strategy, and product management. She knows her Africa well, and I'm sure she would also present to you an objective perspective based on her research and her actual work experience in Africa. Over to you, Tong Wu.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I'm going to present 3 cases today of China-Zambia Agricultural Cooperation based on the field research Vida and I conducted in 2019. We found our Chinese investment in Zambia is very diverse. Let's start it from the ATDC, Agriculture Technology Demonstration Center. ATDC is a flagship project of Chinese agriculture aid program in Africa. The ATDC project was first proposed at the third FOCAC in 2006, and by 2012, over 23 Chinese aid ATDCs were operational. ATDC is designed to be a market-oriented and sustainable cooperation model. The Chinese government provides the construction of infrastructure and provide agriculture equipment and only covers the operational fee of the ATDC for the first 3 years. After the 3 years, and the center needs to fund itself through the income from another business operation. In most cases, each of the ATDC recipient country is connected with one specific province. For instance, in Zambia's case, it's supervised by the government of Jilin province, and all the experts in the Zambia's ATDC, they're from the Jilin University. Currently, the ATDC has 5 Zambians and 6 Chinese staff, among the Chinese experts of whom from Jilin Agriculture University. The center's work is based on the 4 pillars: scientific research, technical demonstration, technical training, and the extension of the technology. During these years, ATDC examined over 460 local variety of crops, introduced the tools and farming technique to local farms, and organized over 50 workshops to train over 1,000 people. Zambia's ATDC case has suggested that ATDC were able to train and transfer knowledge of more productive agriculture method to a large number of smallholder farms, such as mushroom farming, and also hold a high-level training like field management skills for technicians and managerial method for agriculture officers, as well as internship or study opportunities for college students. So that's the funding from the ATDC. Let's go to the next case, which is Zhongkeng Farm. Zhongkeng Farm is one of the oldest farm in Zambia. It is a state-owned enterprise, was established by the China State Farm Agricultural Corporation in 1993. After acquiring over 3,000 hectares of land in China-Zambia. The Chinese manager in charge of this farm is directly appointed by Beijing with an initial term of 3 years, and which is extendable. Zhongkeng Farm used to highly depends on the chicken farming, accounting for around 20% market share in the Zambian market. However, the income from the chicken raising has been decreasing due to the local competition. The farm currently plants wheat in the dry season and plants maize, soybeans, and sunflowers in the rain season. The total amount of the crop production is around 3,000 to 4,000 tons each year, most of which is sold to the local market. The farm currently employs 4 Chinese citizens and 12 Zambian managers and 150 formal employees. Zhongken pays a lot of attention to local manager training, and they have sent 9 managers to China for training that spans over a period of 1 to 2 months. During our conversation with the general manager of the Zhongken farm, and they have good relationship with the local union, and they work with the local community very well. Let's go to the next case, which is Zhongyang Eco Agriculture Park. This case is very special because it was founded by a construction company, which called Zhongyang Construction Group, and it is a private Chinese company, and they don't have any experience on agriculture sectors. However, it has ambitions to build a agricultural industry park as a modern advanced demonstration center with 10 zones and 2 centers. The 10 zones included crop, food processing, seed R&D, digital agriculture, science and education, livestock, forest and animal, fruit, aquatic products, and recreation zones. It's just like we have some samples in China. I think they just want to build everything in one park. 2 centers are an administrative center and the employees residential centers. The group acquired 3,000 hectare farms in Zambia and recruited Chinese agriculture experts with experience in Africa to be as directors. Zhongyang's case indicated the China's long-set optimism on agricultural investment in Zambia. Okay, let's see. We have some during our interview. There are some common challenges. The first, unstable kwacha, high tax rate, and the increasing operation costs bring agriculture business in profit. The second challenge, ATDC provide a new model of aid program and it's replicatable, but Zambia and the Chinese operators operate separately. Third one, Zhongken, being one of the oldest Chinese farm in the country, seems to have established ties with the local workers, although their biggest competition are entrepreneurs who used to work in their farms. Zhongyang's ambition is to build a modern, multifunction agriculture park, represent the confidence from Chinese investors on agriculture sector. The COVID pandemic has slowed down this process and pushed back the ambition plan. There are several takeaways from these 3 cases. Currently, there are more than 40 private Chinese farms operating in Zambia. Their products varying from the crop to poultry. Most of farm target local market. There is no evidence to suggest that these Chinese agriculture investments are focused on exporting products to China. The background of those investors are very diverse. We can see from the case studies. They are from the state-owned company, private, and also the government aid program. And some of them do not have any farming background, but they were driven by profits. Most of the investors, they see agriculture as a business opportunities or a type of investment. Some farmers are very small and only plant some crops providing to Chinese communities in Zambia. That's all the findings for these 3 case studies. Thank you for ICS provided this opportunity so we can share our findings here. I will move to the next speakers. Oh, I'm the last, right?
Thank you very much. This is an incredibly self-disciplined panel that I have the honor to be a part here. So at the end, I think let us go back to Dr. Veda Vaidyanathan, who will present to us the overall conclusions of this study so that we can get a very clear grip, a strong grip on what this study has really concluded and is making policy suggestions. Over to you, Dr. Veda Vaidyanathan.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. As you can see, the chapters in the monograph are all based on studies that each of these authors have conducted independently. So when we did a trial run of this, I was asking everyone to really stick to time. So what they presented today are just very basic insights from their chapters. That said, I thought it's important to just talk about the big conclusions, just to sort of bring the whole conversation together. So some of the key insights is, like Caesar mentioned, the trade currently between China and Zambia is incredibly lopsided, exporting primarily copper and importing a diverse range of products from China, which makes Zambia very vulnerable to market shocks. Investments from China have been exponential, but from conversations with local suppliers, local managers, it seems that there aren't many significant forward or backward linkages. For instance, there were not many successful joint ventures, although there were several incentives provided to build joint ventures. On further questioning, we were told that this is largely because of the technological and skills gap that exists between local Zambian firms and Chinese firms. The local manufacturers also told us that they are unable to compete with prices of Chinese imports. And various members of the local groups that we spoke to, business groups and business councils that we spoke to, said that they were drafting a legislation calling for the government of Zambia to protect the interests of local businesses. That said, one of the areas that we see China prioritizing, which for long has been considered India's forte, is the skills and knowledge transfer. While still, when we spoke to managers in the Zambian managers working in Chinese enterprises, they told us that on-site training relied largely on sign language and learning from observation. When we spoke to members of TEVITA, the vocational training institutes in Zambia, they told us that they've been pairing each of the vocational skill building institutes in Zambia with an institute in China. And everything from upgrading of skills to loaning equipment, training teachers, and providing scholarships to students, and also rehabilitating old buildings, like one of the ones we visited in Luansha, shows that this is an area that is being prioritized. That said, there was palpable, visceral anti-Chinese sentiments in the country, and this is attributed to several socio-cultural stresses. Lack of integration, low safety working standards, lower pay compared to Western companies or even Zambian companies, and also like ignoring local sensibilities. For instance, like I mentioned earlier, when you visit construction sites, it's littered with Chinese characters and Chinese banners. And also the fact that Chinese managers and the diaspora in general tend to be a little insular. Again, to just put a picture on the statement, like a lot of the managers and Chinese entrepreneurs we visited, either in their offices or in their homes, had an armed guard outside their buildings, and they had barbed wire over gates and things. So there was clearly sort of a disconnect between communities. And of course, the question of the conversations around Zambia's increasing debt to China is also a cause of concern. And I'm not sure how many of you caught this, but a few years ago, there was an initiative to include Chinese citizens as part of Zambia's police force. This was met with a lot of backlash, and that was quickly withdrawn. And similarly, a newspaper in Zambia printed its editorial in Mandarin, which also caused a lot of backlash. So clearly, even when you have conversations, the anti-Chinese, the negative perception is a very important concern. That said, given the increase in Chinese small-scale enterprises and entrepreneurs making a base in Zambia, there is a larger diaspora that is being formed. So there was the China-Zambia Association, which only has around 200 members, but we met with some of the officials in that to try and understand what their perspectives were. So what they do essentially is they hold sensitization classes for new Chinese entrepreneurs who come to Zambia, inform them about local laws, local traditions, local customs. They have a WeChat group in which they translate like local news and also information like fuel hike and so on. They also provide like administrative help to new entrepreneurs and also sort of step into dispute resolution roles when Chinese managers and their workers have disputes. That said, another trend which is very clear is also that although Beijing keeps talking about win-win cooperation, there is just excessive dependence on copper and on China. The quantum nature and type of investment flows from Beijing has a direct and severe impact on Lusaka's economy, which poses a significant risk both in the short and long term. But it has to be acknowledged that China has been thinking beyond traditional frameworks of cooperation and seeking out innovative methods of engaging with different stakeholders, seem to have the skill to identify business opportunities in the most unlikely avenues and then build on it and further it. So some quick takeaways. We've written this more in depth in our monograph, but just some quick takeaways for the Indian actors. So for instance, one of the things that we could do is to incentivize investments into Zambia is to set up an India desk or a consultant at the ZDA who could connect Indian and Zambian industries. There's also, I think, a lot of potential in harnessing Indian technological and fintech startups to work with Zambian actors to address challenges like what Muyo had mentioned. In terms of capacity building, I think when we look at Indian capacity building in Zambia, largely in Africa, there are already so many initiatives in place. I think a good starting point would be to conduct an assessment of what has the impact been and what are the necessary changes and tweaks that need to be done, and maybe provide industry-specific capacity building opportunities. This will sort of help leverage Indian strength with, like Musa mentioned, with Zambian requirements. Indian higher education institutions could also possibly be paired with partner institutes in Zambia and maybe have exchange programs in place. Similarly, I think it would also be important to liberalize and encourage Indian states to directly invest as subnational entities and also maybe connect civil society organizations, because that's another area of strength for India. The diaspora, really, the institutions around the diaspora needs to be strengthened and organized to create avenues of cooperation. Like I mentioned earlier during my field visit, and I should quickly mention, the Indian High Commissioner in Lusaka was very helpful in putting me in touch with members of the diaspora. And it was incredible the amount of people I met who were first generation, second generation, who had made a life in Zambia. And I really think that we could use the strength of the diaspora to sort of push our, relationship. That said, I would like to encourage all of you to read the monograph that we've all written, which we've tried to sort of, put our insights together in a couple of minutes. But we'd also like to quickly thank the Tata Trust for funding this project and for making it possible. And to everyone at ICS, thank you very much. This has taken much longer than we thought for many reasons, but it's been a very ambitious project, and I'm glad that we're able to bring it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vaidyanathan. I can assure you that my own assessment of this monograph, which was very positive, my assessment has been further reinforced by multiple remarks which are coming through the chat box, positive remarks from the audience. They all, or many of them, find it very insightful and presentation very, very beneficial. Now, dear friends, members of audience, thank you for staying with us. We really want to use the next 20-25 minutes to involve you fully with this exercise, because that is the kind of two-way traffic that is useful to the scholars and all to the listeners. You are welcome to send your questions through the chat box. And while you do so, I would like to, first of all, do two things. I think it's important to hear the African voices a little bit more. We have three Zambian panelists here, and so let me take the privilege as chair to ask a question to all three of them, and they can take their turns to answer them. And thereafter, if Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan is still in the audience, I would request him to take a couple of minutes to make a couple of broad observations, and maybe he would also have a question for the panel. So, dear friends, Mr. Chulu, and Mr. Sika Lubea, You all have presented your views very well. My question is, when it comes to the perceptions of Chinese economic contribution to Zambia's growth, what is one positive trait that you would like to highlight? And what is one negative trait that you would highlight based on your own experience and study and what you hear living in your own country? And when it comes to Mr. Sikalubea, I request him also to remember my question, which is that those fancy drones, they are flown, maintained, and operated by Chinese or Zambians, or by a mixed effort. So that would be the additional question to you. So may I request first Mr. Chilo to go first.
Thank you, Excellency. I hope my connection is clear now.
It's much better now, yes.
Thank you. I think in terms of perceptions, one at the macro level from me as an economist is to do with the debt. I think there have been significant concerns on the one side that the debt has contributed immensely to Zambia's overall indebtedness. And also there's a lot of aspects to do with the non-transparency of the contraction of the debt, the procurement rules around who supplies services to do with that debt, collateralization, and so on. So there are a number of concerns in that basket about how much access does Zambia actually have to that debt. And that's a significant concern at the macro level. So not just the indebtedness, but the quality of the debt. On the other side of the same coin, on the debt, if you look at Chinese debt, it seems a lot more effective than other forms of external debt in delivering on things like infrastructure, productive capacities, and so on. If you look at, in comparison, the euro bonds that Zambia borrowed, you cannot tie them to specific projects that you can see. But whereas the Chinese debt, when it is taken, you can actually see the roads, the airports, the hospitals, the education facilities. So that is a significant positive in the way Chinese debt seems to be very effective in settling in the host country and actually delivering it's at least a significant portion of the intended benefit to the beneficiary country. Thank you, Excellency.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chulu, over to you.
Thank you. I'll respond to your question from an agricultural perspective. I think China's engagement with Zambia, especially vis-a-vis the economic contribution, one of the positives coming out of it has been Zambia has got access to Chinese agricultural products, have got access to Chinese markets. Particularly, we've got products such as Zambian honey being given preferential access to the Chinese markets. And also recently, Zambian grown blueberries being given access to the Chinese markets. And I think this is very important for the country if it is to move away from dependency on copper exports to other commodities. The negative side of it has been maybe there's been very little export-oriented Chinese investment in Zambia over the last few years. Most of the investment in the agriculture sector by the Chinese could be because it is focused on production and supplying the local market. This could speak to some of the case studies that Tong presented, where one of the Chinese companies raised the concern on competition with the local markets. So that has been a negative because they're also competing on the local markets. It would be more positive if they produced and were able to export to China through the Chinese connection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very succinct and I think very honest answer in terms of the inadequacy of the Chinese loans to enhance the manufacturing capacity that enables an important African country to export more, perhaps not only to China, but to the other countries, and thereby elevate itself from the raw materials exporter to a manufacturer. Thank you very much. And now we come to the third panelist, Mr. Sikalubia.
Thank you so much for the question that you've posed. To begin with, the main initiators of this, technology are the Chinese, while the Zambians are the recipients. Therefore, when it comes to the operational of these drones, we have a mixed approach where the Chinese participate as well as the Zambian, farmers participate. However, the Chinese are the main initiators of this technology. So they train, they're the ones who train, Zambians to use this technology. Then when it comes to maintenance and repairing some of these drones, it's entirely done by the Chinese. And I think that's a major gap that still exists up to date, because most of the Zambians, they haven't really taken the technical know-how on how to repair some of these devices, even the management of some of these devices. As I said earlier, that the industry is still at infant stage, and therefore they still need of robust investment in this sector, so that at least most of the Zambians can be equipped with the technical know-how. And also we appeal to the Indians if they can come on board and meet with the Ministry of Agriculture, so that they can be able to train and set even plants in Zambia, where manufacturing can be even take place within Zambia. I think that will also reduce on the cost of production. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think through your composite answer, you have actually answered my two broad questions as well. The positive part being that Zambia is getting an exposure to such high-tech instruments as a drone in the field of agriculture, which may not be happening in many other parts of the world. And the negative part being that in actual operation, maintenance, management, the main contribution is by Chinese, and the know-how transfer is obviously to Zambians is still very limited. Thank you very much for a very straightforward answer. Let me now check if Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan is willing to help us. Are you here, Bhaskar? And would you like to make a couple of brief comments and perhaps ask a question or two to the panelists? Bhaskar?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ambassador Bhatia. Thank you, ICS, and all the panelists for an excellent presentation, very thought-provoking. I've already put most of my comments on the chat box, so I won't repeat them. I think two things are clear. One is that there is a tremendous potential for cooperation with India in agriculture, given Zambia's high availability of arable land and agroclimatic conditions which are suitable for practically any crop which grows in India grows in Zambia. I have seen that during my time in Zambia. So this is a potential which needs to be exploited. Correctly, Veda has pointed out the Indian diaspora, which is playing an important role in Zambia's development in all fields. We also need to take note of that. The third point is that China is facing a difficult situation regarding its management of debt. And Zambia, what it does in Zambia will be looked at very closely by other countries like Angola and all across Africa. So it is in China's interest to be as generous as possible in managing this debt with Zambia. One hopes that at least a significant debt concession will emerge from the discussions with Zambia. There is a certain lack of transparency about what are the terms of Chinese loans to many countries. They are not part of the Paris Club. This is attracting a lot of international concern. So we'll have to watch closely how China handles the debt management with Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhaskar, for your valuable contribution. I'm scanning the chat box and I find Mr. Vipin Saini referring to his own business exposure and experience in Zambia. And he's saying fundamentally that the ease of doing business in Zambia, at least for Indian companies, is rather limited. And he's expressing his disappointment on this matter. So let me go to Dr. Vaidyanathan on this one. And since she drew some conclusions also for the Indian companies, do you have briefly an advice for Mr. Vipin Saini and other Indian business people who are watching this and who are interested in going into Zambia in a bigger way? And they surely are encouraged by the Zambian panelists who are virtually inviting Indians to play a bigger role. What do you think should be done? How can this be overcome? Over to you.
Thank you, sir. This is actually a criticism that I've heard quite a lot. For instance, when I was at the University of Mumbai, we set up this course for Indian entrepreneurs in Bombay who wanted to go to Africa. It was called Focus Africa, an introduction sort of a course where we got people from the industry, from across sectors, as well as academics on board. And we had, initially we prepared for like some 20 entrepreneurs, but I remember we had over 50 entrepreneurs from Bombay who already had previous experience of doing business in Africa. And this was a common criticism. But with this case in particular, I think he's speaking in very specific terms about the officers that he met and the institutions that he worked with, and why it did not work out. So I cannot speak to this particular case, but I think from what I understood talking to people at the Indian High Commission was that they did want to play a role, especially the Commercial Council did want to play a role in sort of being a conduit for Indian investors. But one of the criticisms or one of the frustrations that they had mentioned to me was that, a lot of Indian businesses who come to us, who come to Zambia, don't really come via us. They come to us when they're in trouble, or they come to us when there is sort of an issue. But more than that, I found the officials at the Zambia Development Agency to be very open to investments. They had hired a lot of new staff. There were a lot of people, and there were certain offices that were targeting foreign investors, and they were very generous with me with their time and also by providing data. So I would just, I don't know, I think my initial top of my head response would be to get in touch with officials at ZDA and maybe take it from there if the Indian embassy route wasn't working.
Thank you very much. What does come out from your study, and this is for Mr. Vipin Saini really, is that China's generosity and China's historic role have still failed to enhance the manufacturing capability of Zambia. This is what our Zambian friends are telling us today once again. Therefore, Indian investment of the kind that can contribute to the manufacturing capacity in whatever fashion, whether it is soaps or it is toothpaste or it is shoes or it is textiles or it is electronics or services, if that could be done, I think we can give to Chinese a good run for their money. That is my impression. But now let me very quickly refer and run through the very provocative question which Mr. Malcolm Chabala has asked. Does India have an Africa policy? Now this strictly is outside the purview of today's discussion. And if you will be good enough to recommend to the Director, Institute of Chinese Studies, to hold the next seminar on this subject, I think some of us would be very happy to share our view extensively with you. But the short answer is that yes, India does have an Africa policy. It is based on very sound considerations. It is a mixture of values and interests. And the only one example that I need to cite to convince you that it is so, in the year 2000, India's trade with Africa was barely $5 billion. And today, that is last year, 2019, India's trade reached roughly about $75 billion. So there is a very dynamic economic policy, and there is a very strong stress at the highest political levels in the relationship with Africa. Let me now, since I'm not seeing questions, I'd like to turn to Ms. Tong Wu. I'll come to you in a minute, Veda, because it's important that we be fair to very quickly. Or you want to say something? Go ahead.
No, sir, I just wanted to point out that Mr. Chakravarti has had his hand raised for a while.
Okay, so I'll come to him also. Thank you for letting me know. Ms. Tong Wu, the question to you is, again, very simple. You have extensive experience as a consultant helping various foreign companies operate and flourish in Africa. On the basis of your expertise and on the basis of your study as part of this, what is your advice to the Indian companies? How can they do it differently so that they increase their footprint in Africa?
Hello. Okay. For India company, right? So I think during the research, Vida and I have conducted the interview with the India entrepreneur, and I found out that India entrepreneur really pay more attention about how much I pay and how much I get back. So they're very good at that math, like calculate exactly what is the profit they will get from this investment. However, I think Chinese entrepreneurs is a little bit different. Of course, they care about the profit, but they are more looking for the big pictures. They see the opportunities. They think like our government is invested heavily in this continent. Even this like a deal. I didn't make money, but I will make money in the future. So I think this different mindset really is like give me a lot of thinking about how the differences between the two nationalities doing business. There are a lot of philosophy to do the business. I think this make me very impressive. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your answer. Let me turn to Mr. Chakravarti. For some reason, I can't see his hand raised here, but I'm more than happy to invite him to put his question himself to the panel. Over to you, Mr. Chakravarti.
Thank you, sir. My question is to Dr. Vaidyanathan. See, China, wherever it moves with the civil, issues, also brings in its military issues. Are there any defense products which are coming to Zambia? Is there any defense cooperation? Anything which you see the Chinese, because they just don't move in purely for just economic reasons. They have a mix of civil and military fusion in whatever they do. I'm sure, having observed you in many discussions, Dr. Veda would be able to take on this question.
Go ahead, Veda.
So this is not an area that I've studied, so I don't want to speak with any confidence whatsoever. But that said, in my readings, yes, Zambia does purchase arms and military equipment from China. There is an element of that in the relationship, but I wouldn't really tie it to this discussion. I think it's a whole separate other discussion. But yes, that's you're absolutely right in the fact that it is one of the biggest suppliers of defense equipment for Zambia.
Thank you. I think that is what I call the sign of an astute researcher. Tell them if we know. If we don't, then we don't venture forward. There is, dear friends, the last question that I'm going to put to the panel, and it's an interesting question. I think it's a question on the front of everybody's mind, and I'm going to slightly twist it so that I can involve the African voices as well. The question reads, would India view itself in competition or cooperation with China with regard to African influence? So the question as it is framed will have to go to Veda, but the slightly tweaked version would be this, which will go to the three Zambian panelists and also to Tong Wu, the revised version would be, does Africa see India and China in competition, battling for influence in Africa? So first, over to you, Veda.
So I would sort of distance myself from the competition narrative, because I think that China and India bring to the canvas completely different strengths. I think the context from which we operate, the instruments we have at our disposal, the resources we have at our disposal, the strengths we are playing at, the weaknesses we are grappling with are all entirely different. Comparison would happen if we were playing on an even field and we were playing the same sort of, I don't even want to use the word playing because that's not serious, but if we were operating on different levels. But I think we bring to the canvas very, very different strengths. That said, I genuinely feel, and this is going to sound super cliche, but I genuinely feel that there is space for both Asian actors to contribute productively. Because like you mentioned, when you look at the opportunities in these African countries, and when you look at the kinds of areas in which we can operate, for instance, just to give you a quick example, these mega infrastructure projects that China is undertaking, we obviously don't have the quantum of resources at our disposal to undertake projects like that. But we've seen that from these mega infrastructure projects come smaller opportunities. For instance, in Tanzania, some of the Chinese contractors told us that they only use Tata tipper lorries, that they subcontracted to subcontract parts of their work to Indian suppliers. Later on, of course, when I dug a little further, I realized that they are members of the diaspora and not first generation Indians. But still, there are opportunities even in these interactions. So I would sort of say that while there is space and while there is space for so many different kinds of opportunities to work together, I wouldn't pit us against each other. And I would sort of distance myself from the competition narrative and be very idealistic about it and say, let's just figure out what we can do and let's just play our strengths and leverage our resources.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Chelo, what do you think? Mr. Chilo, sorry, what do you think of the question tweaked to you?
Thank you, Excellency. I think taking a cue from Veda earlier on, I haven't sufficiently studied the aspects of economic, social, cultural, and geopolitical perspectives, motives, and lines of engagement of India. I do understand things from Zambia-China perspective, and from that perspective, it seems like the emphasis is more on cooperation than competition. And I think the only way that competition would come in is if, from at least from my point of view, is if I understood a little bit better what the set of economic incentives and disincentives, like I said, are on the India side. But I actually don't have sufficient knowledge and information to see if there's a competition element to that, and I would defer to better judgment on that aspect.
Thank you. Thank you for your integrity. Mr. Chulu?
Thank you. My opinion would be to build on what Veda has just said. I don't think there's competition between China and India for African interests. And I think Veda has elaborately outlined the reasons why this competition may not be there. One of the things I might speak anecdotally of is the areas of interest for the Chinese and the Indians in the Zambian economy. The Chinese might be more focused on mining and construction, while if you see a lot of Indian investment is skewed towards maybe pharmaceutics and to a certain extent agricultural equipment. But without much knowledge on that, I would only end at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Suka Lubia.
Thank you so much, Excellency, for that question. As my colleagues have alluded to, I think there is need for an in-depth study of that equation. However, I think China and Zambia, they are more into cooperation. That's why there's that advantage of win-win cooperation. So I wouldn't think that if India comes on board, it will foster competition. However, the focus of Zambians at large is to improve the economy, make sure that there's economic growth, and alleviate poverty in the country. So that's the major focus of the majority of Zambians, is to improve the standard of living for its citizens. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And finally, Tongbu.
Oh, well. Okay, so first, I think I agree with Vida. There is, from the big picture, there is no direct competition between two countries. And for instance, China is their strength is infrastructure and manufacturing. So if you see the most of the Africa countries, you can see the Chinese manufacturing and the construction companies or construction projects here, but few India company, it's not none. I mean, few India's company there. But however, in another side, for pharmaceutical and even the healthcare provider, the India company is the majority. You barely can see any Chinese companies here. So the Indian pharmaceutical they build the pharmaceutical manufacturing in the Uganda and Ethiopia, and also most of the doctor in hospitals in Africa, you can see there's some Indian nationalities there. So that's something I quite affirm what Dr. Vida said, like there are no big rivals competition over there.
Thank you very much, panelists, for handling that complex and sensitive question. It's now left, I think, to me to wrap up this dialogue, which has been quite remarkable for its granular details. This is not one of those discussions where we were discussing broad themes and broad features. We really focused on a single African country, Zambia, important in itself. And like a laser, we focused attention on the economic aspects, in particular the agricultural sector. And some of us who actually have studied this monograph, it goes into much greater details, as you can imagine. And it does point out a lot of local sensibilities which are affected. It talks about a scene where a Chinese local vendor in a village is found selling chicken, causing insecurity in the minds of the local Zambians. Or a scene where a Chinese laborer imported directly from China is working on some project or the other. Or what came out in the discussion today, the world's latest technologies, drone in agriculture, being used in Zambia, which badly needs to do much better on agriculture, but obviously with the entire assistance of the Chinese side. But what is very important is that Zambia was selected for a variety of political and economic reasons. And our young Zambian friends with a lot of experience of their own were essentially putting across the view that Zambia, like other African countries, can do with more and more cooperation that is with China, but that probably also go beyond China. And I think that is the message that is coming out from this study and this dialogue as far as Africa is concerned. And in a way, not just the last minute answers, but the entire narrative answers this latent question about the competition and cooperation between India and China in Africa. Actually, it's a broader question. The very first point with which I began, namely, there are traditional partners of Africa, Europe, US, Japan. Then there are other important Asian powers ranging from China to India to Indonesia to UAE and so on. And on top of that, there are other international partners such as Brazil. I think this is the most fascinating field I find of seeing how foreign countries have been working in Africa and how some of them tend to collaborate with each other while others actually compete with each other. So here in this context, since in many ways China has become the leader, you can see that other countries are pairing together and trying to cooperate in order to compete with China. For example, India finds it easier to collaborate with countries such as UAE, US, UK, France, and Japan to do combined trilateral projects in Africa. But be that as it may, let me present a very warm vote of thanks to the panelists for their expertise, the time they made available for us, their integrity, and their massive contribution to this monograph. I'm particularly grateful to the editor and the leader, Dr. Veda Vaidyanathan, who has really made a stellar contribution by presenting a very innovative study. And above all, thank you very much, dear audience. I think ICS, known for its high quality dialogue, has made all its facilities available to us for this very important flagship event of their institution. I would like in particular to thank Colonel Venkat, who provided sterling assistance, technical assistance from behind the scenes. And I once again thank Ambassador Ashok Kanta, Director ICS, for giving us this opportunity for going into depth to discuss Africa's issues, which was very, very satisfying. So thank you very much. I think we are ending more or less on time. I wish to thank all of you a wonderful day or a relaxed night, and keep well and stay safe, and hope we will work together once again. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.